Breaking tonight, Canada's most consequential defense decision in 66 years is back on the table. Washington is watching. The ghost of Black Friday is watching. And Mark Carney, the man who rebuilt economies under fire, is the one holding the pen. The pressure is extraordinary right now. Canada agreed to purchase 88 F-35s. Only 16 are paid for. The remaining 72 are now being reconsidered. Alternatives are being examined openly. Saab's Gripen, France's Rafale, and hovering over every conversation, like a dark cloud rolling in from the south, is Washington's warning. Walk away from the F-35, and the United States will fill the gaps itself. American fighters, Canadian airspace, a NORAD restructured on American terms. Everyone believed Canada had no choice. Defense analysts assumed the dependency was permanent. Washington calculated that Ottawa would blink. They assumed Canada was too integrated, too cautious, too financially constrained to consider any other path. They were all utterly incorrect. Ottawa, 2026. The question that Canada has been avoiding since February 20th, 1959, has finally arrived with a face and a deadline. The question is not which jet to buy. The question is whether Canada will remain a customer forever or reclaim its seat at the table where decisions are actually made. Translation: the F-35 debate was never just about an aircraft. It is about sovereignty. And Mark Carney knows exactly what that word costs when you give it up cheaply. To understand what Carney is facing, you have to go back to the moment Canada stopped believing in itself. The year is 1953. The Arctic is not a wilderness. It is a battleground. Soviet bombers carrying nuclear payloads have one obvious flight path to American cities, straight over Canadian territory. Canada is not a junior partner in this arrangement. Canada is the forward line, the shield, the first response. The Royal Canadian Air Force surveys British designs, American designs, French designs. They examine everything on offer. Their conclusion is blunt. Nothing meets the requirement. So Canada decides to build its own interceptor from scratch. That decision alone placed Canada in rare company. Designing a frontline fighter from the ground up requires industrial depth, political will, and the kind of confidence that small nations rarely sustain for long. Canada sustained it. Avro Canada built the CF-105 Arrow, a delta-wing interceptor capable of Mach 1.5 at 70,000 feet, with advanced avionics, radar-guided weapons systems, and a Canadian-designed engine, the Orenda Iroquois, that was considered among the finest power plants of its era. The Arrow rolled out publicly in October 1957. On the same day, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. History has a dark sense of humor. The Arrow flew in March 1958. It went supersonic quickly. By early 1959, multiple prototypes were airborne, and production standard aircraft with Iroquois engines were nearing readiness. Canada was, for a brief and brilliant moment, on the verge of fielding one of the most advanced interceptors on the planet. 66 flights, approximately 70 flight hours. Then it stopped. February 20th, 1959. Black Friday. Prime Minister John Diefenbaker's government canceled the Arrow and the Iroquois engine program simultaneously. The reasons were real. The Arrow was expensive. NORAD had just been formalized. Washington was pivoting toward ballistic missiles. Canada could not fund everything at once. The government chose alliance integration and cost control over domestic aerospace ambition. That decision, painful as it was, could have been absorbed. What followed could not. The government didn't just cancel the Arrow. It destroyed it. Airframes were cut apart. Blueprints were incinerated. Tooling was dismantled. The program was erased with a thoroughness that still stuns historians today. Thousands of engineers lost their jobs overnight. Many left Canada entirely, carrying their expertise south to American aerospace firms and eventually to NASA. Canada didn't just lose a fighter jet, it lost a generation of capability, a culture of aerospace ambition, and something harder to quantify, the confidence that comes from building something genuinely world-class and calling it your own. Dear viewers, that is the wound that has never fully healed. And it is the wound that every subsequent Canadian defense procurement has quietly bled from. Because what Diefenbaker's government did in 1959 was not merely cancel a program. It converted Canada's identity in the aerospace world, permanently. Canada went from being a designer nation to a customer nation. And in the 66 years since, it has never looked back, or rather, it has never been allowed to look forward. France looked forward. Paris chose to preserve independent combat aviation capability through Mirage, through Rafale, and now through next-generation European programs. France still decides what flies over French territory. France still controls the software, the sustainment, the upgrade pathway. Sweden looked forward. Stockholm evolved the Gripen line over decades, accepting trade-offs in raw performance, but retaining something France and Sweden both understood was worth more than any single specification: control. When Sweden needs to make a decision about its own airspace, there is no call to make to a foreign capital first. Canada has been making that call since 1959. Every fighter Canada has flown since the Avro has been imported. Every procurement cycle has involved trade-offs negotiated on someone else's terms. And now the F-35, perhaps the most advanced fighter ever built, comes attached to the most comprehensive web of dependency ever designed into a weapons system. The F-35 is not just an aircraft. It is a system of systems. Software updates controlled by Lockheed Martin and the U.S. Department of Defense. Mission data files that determine what the aircraft can even see and target. Sustainment pipelines that run through American logistics networks. Upgrade decisions made in Washington, not Ottawa. When politics align, that works fine. When politics don't align, and right now, make no mistake, Canadian and American politics are not aligned. That dependency becomes a lever. And Washington just made clear it is prepared to use it. This is where Mark Carney enters the frame. And this is why this moment is different from every defense debate Canada has had since the Avro. Carney is not a politician who stumbled into economics. He is an economist who chose public service at the moments when the stakes were highest. He rebuilt confidence in the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis. He steadied the Bank of England through the chaos of Brexit. He understands at a structural level that crises are not interruptions to strategy. They are the moments when strategy gets decided. He also understands something that most defense ministers never do: the difference between cost and investment. A government that sees defense procurement as a budget line will always find reasons to buy the cheaper foreign option. A government that sees defense procurement as long-term strategic positioning asks a different question entirely. Not what does this cost today, but what does dependency cost over 30 years? The F-35 is not cheap, but the Gripen comes with something the F-35 does not. Saab has offered, explicitly and on the record, to transfer technology to Canadian industry, to allow Canadian firms into the production chain, to create aerospace capability on Canadian soil, rather than simply selling Canada an aircraft with a foreign software stack and a sustainment bill that runs forever through American channels. That offer is not just about saving money, it is about answering the Avro's question: who really controls Canada's skies? The Diefenbaker government made its choice under pressure and called it pragmatism. 66 years later, Canada is still paying for that pragmatism, one procurement cycle at a time. Carney's government is not Diefenbaker's government. The pressures are real. Washington is explicit. The military has its preferences. The industrial base has its lobbying network. But the strategic context is different in one critical way. Canada's relationship with the United States is no longer something that can be taken for granted. That was always true. Now it is visible. And when vulnerability becomes visible, capable leaders do not retreat into dependency. They build alternatives. Canada rebuilding aerospace capacity would not happen overnight. No one serious is suggesting that Ottawa cancels the F-35 and launches a new Aero program by the end of the decade. That is not the conversation. The conversation is about whether Canada uses this procurement decision to begin reversing the trajectory of 1959. Whether the next 30 years of Canadian military aviation look like the last 66, or whether Carney puts something different on the table: partnership agreements, technology transfer clauses, domestic production requirements, a foot in the door of the industry it walked away from when it torched the blueprints. The Aero was not stolen from Canada. It was surrendered by a government that couldn't see the full cost of what it was giving up. The engineers who built it understood. They tried to hide blueprints. They salvaged what parts they could. They carried the memory of what Canada had almost become, south across the border, into American programs that benefited enormously from their expertise. Canada built something genuinely extraordinary in the 1950s. It then destroyed it, and every fighter jet procured since has quietly confirmed that the destruction was permanent. Mark Carney has a narrow window to ask whether it has to stay that way. That is not a question about aircraft. It is a question about what kind of country Canada intends to be for the next half-century. And if you have, I've been watching this channel long enough, you already know that Canada, when it chooses ambition over dependency, has always been capable of the answer Washington least expects. If that question matters to you, subscribe. This is the conversation that doesn't end with a procurement announcement. It ends when Canada decides it's done asking permission to defend itself.